Welcome back. Thank you for joining me. Today I'm going to go through a video with Ableton's Arpeggiator and how I like to use it with Simpler. I'm going to show it in the context of throwing kick drums in there and using the Arpeggiator to get some wonky patterns out of it, which I then use for kick grooves. Not so much to layer in my kick groups, but I use them as sort of the driving force of my track to give it a gallop or an energy, an offbeat bass, depending how it sounds, depending on what I get out of it. I'll maybe even turn that into a rumble because we can just cut off all the highs, and because we've used a kick source, we'll have that low end anyway. And because of the pattern and the rhythms that Arpeggiator can spit out, it can lead to a rumble as well. So it's a very simple trick. It's not, going to change your life, but I use it a lot. And you hear it in one of my tracks called Blood Bucket that I made a few years back, which is quite a strong industrial track. And basically what's happening is I use this technique in that track, and it really gave me that industrial gallop. I remember specifically because it was the first time I sort of was really happy with that rhythm sound that was driving the track outside of a sub or a rumble. And what happened was, threw the kick drums in there, experimented, did some automation on the Arpeggiator with the rate, which would sort of spaz it in and out of control to my liking. And then once I was happy with the pattern, I was basically duplicating it, changing the samples, grouping it, and then processing the group, which got it really chunky as well. So I've just set up a 4/4 kick drum just so we can hear it in context over at kick if you're in a production file. So very simple, create a MIDI clip. I've dragged Ableton's Simpler on there. I've got Q3 on there in case you want to roll off some high end to show you what it can sound like. And I've just simply thrown on the Arpeggiator. It does have presets in Ableton when you click down on Arpeggiator in MIDI effects. If we go here, Arpeggiator, it's got a whole bunch of these. I did used to use Housier than Though, but I've just been throwing on and playing with it from there. So anyway, let's keep it simple. And you can do this with any sound source. I also do it with hi-hats, to be honest. I'll throw a hat in there or a cymbal or even some sort of relative sounding sound, and I'll use it this way to get that sort of rhythmic pattern out of it, which if you automate it excessively, or not even excessively, if you do automate the rate of it and even the gate and the steps, there's a few automations we can control, which can really get a unique sound, or maybe something that you wouldn't have thought to have drawn, or even have thought to maybe create yourself. So straight into it, we'll get a kick drum. Let's just throw this in, set the Simpler to 1 shot. Now if we go, it won't trigger anything, so normally I'll just draw a line. Alright, so if we take the steps off, set the distance to 0. So you're hearing that rate at 1/8. Now, if the distance is acting like a transpose basically, but we have full control of all of this, so we can you can get swing sounds out of it. Obviously you can still change the grooves. When you first start doing it, if you haven't done it before, it might sound a bit funny or a bit unnatural, right? That's sort of the point as well, because you can go down a rabbit hole of possibilities that you might not have thought you would have liked or ventured to explore. But once it starts bringing it to light, especially if you start processing it, it can really maybe make you use something you wouldn't have thought to have used originally. So if we, now it sounds a bit wonky, right? And what we'll do is But you have to try. You have to experiment and see what it sounds like in the context of the kick. It's not always going to work off the bat. But you'll hear it. If you play with it in context with the kick, you might get a gallop that you like. Now, the beauty of this is, if we mute this, you know, you could roll off the highs, start processing this, duplicate it, reverb, delay, all the rumble stuff, and really start getting that bounce underneath your track of the main kick drum. But I'll leave that for you to do. I'll leave it off just so we can keep exploring what's happening. And what I normally do is, if I'm liking something like that, I will then maybe even throw a perk or something in there to then layer and strengthen. Now, depending what you're using. You can really build sort of the main groove and elements of the track from this procedure. And then the beauty of, once you sort of lock in a pattern, there's so many things you can do. You can keep duplicating and changing the sound source to sort of stack that pattern if it became like the main driving part of the track. Or you can even then change the pattern a little bit and change the sound source so you get different variations within the one track. So now, even if we start throwing an acid line, right? The good thing is, if you start building a track, let's say you get out of the loop phase, right? And let's just throw a hat in there. Percussion, hi-hats. The good thing is if you have something, if you have, say, the acid joining the gallop, right? How I would then start to build that is filtering the acid up. And when we hear it, it's not that it wouldn't make sense if it wasn't the same pattern or if it wasn't following the gallop, right, or the rhythm, but it's going to come in quite smoothly. And what I've done in the past is I'll do the exact same thing, but I'll put more of just a hit on there, right? Like an impact of something. Few things. You can either freeze it to audio to get so you can see the waveform, like the pattern, and then flip that to MIDI, or you can take the arpeggiator settings off and just draw it in that same motion to get rid of that pitch bending sound. So if we get rid of the acid, you can really create a solid sounding track because everything's following each other. But then what I would do is I'd duplicate. I know it's going to be messy now. Let's fuck that off. So this is acid. We'll call this groove. Let's say clap. We know that's a hat loop. What I will do then here, going back to this kick, I'd play around with it again. Because if I like it better, what I could do is I could switch out that main groove, leave the acid, hat, and clap following itself, and then sort of make it a bit unusual by then having a different main groove. So I don't like all of that. So again, I'd freeze that to audio, flatten it to get the waveform. I'd be zooming in and seeing what I do like. I really like that. So a few things, you can either just do it like this, keep that bounce going, or you could sort of chop up what's there, which I love to do as well. So if we fuck that off and zoom in, and as you can see, you can sort of, I mean, you'd get more detailed with cutting your samples around, but let's say it was that I was liking, I'd consolidate it, then I'd have my new loop basically. Let's have a look. So then the two together, it's going to phase out. Let's get rid of that for now. I like this one better. But because it's sort of not far off the original setting, it can still work with the original acid pattern, clap pattern, and so on. Or if you weren't liking any of that, you might then restructure the acid and all that around the new pattern you've made. And then as well, if you really get in on the hat, you can see the waveforms. This is also why I work in arrangement view. You could really start stacking that instrument. And this could be anything really, whether it was a snare, perk, metal hit. So if we go back here, you can really build a, you could actually, I did this with Blood Bucket, I should have put it in this session, but I built the whole song around that. I sort of found that groove, I really liked it, I processed it and laid it, got it really strong. It was pretty much the main focal point of the track, and then that just set up everything. Everything else I put on top was easy. It just flowed, right? Now, it's not something too crazy, right? But it is a little bit more unique and different to what you typically hear, just with a 4/4 offbeat hi-hat, or just a, 16th note offbeat bass line or something. So it is a good way to sort of bring out something different, but still sound solid. Not to mention, when you go back to your original MIDI, the possibilities you've still got here are endless. And what I do a lot in breakdowns is, so let's loop this section here, is with the rate, I will leave the rate there. Now this might not work, but I'm just going to show you more so the concept. So this rate that we're moving here, I do this all the time. If we zoom in, we can bend the rate and draw in whatever we like, right? And what starts happening is you get some really fucking wonky stuff, right? Let's have a listen. Of course, you could map this with an LFO as well and let it do the work for you. So what I'll do in this scenario, I'll either get it to a point where I like it, freeze it, and just take the waveform, or I'll just resample this into another audio channel, so I've got the whole recording session, and then go in and take in and out bits of what I like. And as you know, me, I would save that, put it in my own folder. So I've always got this loop that I've made, right? The reason being, if I come back in another session, this is in one of my folders on the side, it might not suit what I've already started doing in this particular project. But, of course, we can process, EQ, shave. Hang on, I can go there. And you can just re-chop up what you've got and move things around and see what can work. Now that sounds a bit aggressive because we can hear that punch of the kick, right? And this is a very short loop within one kick drum, but if we go to, let's just throw this on. quite an aggressive cut, but I'm just demonstrating. You can work on this and then sort of work out how you want to process it, or where you want to take it at least. Of course, we'll throw the kick fucker on there. Of course, it wants to jam. It's just coming in hot. But then, even if you weren't cutting it, you might get to a point where it still might be something that you'd use. So if we loop this, then we can side chain it. So right now it doesn't sound that great, but based on the basis of that sound, I would work on that more, EQing, side chaining and all that. And you could slot that in, but basically full circle, for one MIDI clip, arpeggiator, and just one kick sample, you can really manipulate it to spit out some really random stuff. Then you've got a few options to either resample, freeze the audio, and even manipulate and chop that audio in further, or you can just generally process as well. But then also you can stack percussion and any other sound. You could do it with a little vox, anything, and you can really stack that gallop or that particular rhythm to really build a really solid foundation. So short one today, but I have found it effective. Check out that track Blood Bucket. I did it in 2019, I think it was. It was quite industrial. It's about 136 BPM. But anyway, check it out. I hope you enjoyed it. These are kick drums from EAS's new pack, which is fucking mental. And I'll be back soon with some more content. Thanks for tuning in. Arrivederci.